I am unashamed. What about you?
So welcome back to the award-winning Unashamed podcast.
Are you going to say that every time?
I want to say it every time, but I had to at least say it one time. we are now an award-winning podcast.
That was the takeaway, right? We are now an
award-winning
award-winning
We
podcast.
will now be doing a podcast on the verse from Romans that says a man should not think of himself more highly than he ought.
We are an award-winning
there.
podcast.
Sure, we're exactly.
I've not won many awards in my life, Jase. There's just a few, you know.
Yeah.
I was Mr. Pinecrest. That's really the only title I've ever had. I was in the 8th grade when I had that one, so
That's big.
that's a big deal. You know,
That's good. I mean, I think there were 32 students there.
But you mentioned, one of y'all did the previous 10 years, decade, and Jase was kind of playfully saying, 37 people showed up.
No, that was at the K level. That was my joke.
that was his joke.
that I
yeah.
lost the teleprompter on. I think what I said was I was being
Facetious. You were being facetious.
but Missy, of course, Missy's
your word of the
response
day.
off the cuff was, "This is why I don't listen to the podcast." Which
Yes,
I
you
told
did
her
say
later. I said, "Thanks for the ringing endorsement."
I mean, to finish my
Luckily,
point,
we had already won.
to
Go ahead,
finish,
Dad.
finish my point, I don't remember maybe the Billy Graham days back then, but it seemed like to me that there's a movement at hand within the kingdom of God. I mean, I sensed movement, big time movement
Yeah,
in the kingdom. Listening to these people the other night and watching them and their reactions
that's a good point.
and what they're doing.
Oh, that's true.
I have seen that the last decade. This is the first time I've said, we may be getting somewhere here.
Right.
Well, that reminds me of a funny story, and I know we're going to get into Luke 5 today, so prepare, put your seatbelt on. But so I've had this ongoing kind of spat with what's the radio called that comes in your vehicle?
Siri or
Yeah,
Sirius?
the Sirius.
Yeah.
So what happened was when I sold my old truck, I had just renewed my subscription. I mean, I was on a trip. It took like, over an hour talking to a person. So I get that. But I sold my other truck. Well, when that person bought my truck, they turned off my Sirius radio in my new truck. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Right.
Well, it made me mad because I thought, because then now they were like, well, call us and renew your subscription. But I just did. So I just said, okay, I'm boycotting this. I was angry. So all of a sudden, Phil mentioned that since the Billy Graham days, about a week ago, when we got back from vacation, or a few days ago, well, I have one channel now that's on. It was on. And it's the Billy Graham channel. That's the only channel I got. And I thought to myself, are they sending me a message that they're praying for me? Or is this just a sign? So I have one channel, and it's the Billy Graham channel.
So you're getting a lot of Billy Graham these days.
Every time I turn on my truck, Billy Graham is
preaching.
just, I didn't realize, I mean, the man was a fireball.
Oh, he's a great
It is
preacher.
one fireballer after another. So now I'm kind of happy about the whole arrangement because I thought, okay, this winning, speaking of winning.
That's kind of my point. It was like there was a point when he was preaching his sermons, and the kingdom of God I thought was headed in the right direction, but that's begun to wane some until what I saw the other night.
But Phil, I've
And
noticed.
this may be the beginning.
Yeah, it was good. We talked about that in the extra time, that it was a 7-8 hour celebration that we were at with fans, and there was not a hint of any kind of immorality or filthy language.
very encouraging.
It was just really encouraging. It was fantastic. But I will say this about Billy Graham. You have a lot in common. I mean, he was in the vein of your style of preaching with the blunt. I didn't realize how blunt Billy Graham is.
Yeah.
So, because I've listened to, obviously, it's on every time I get on. It's just, he's pretty blunt.
Well, and we didn't, Willie and I got to meet him, which was a real honor for me, being a pastor for many years. But we have become good friends with Franklin and Will and some of the rest of and Sissy and the family. So it's been really neat to just get, like us, be a family that has dedicated your lives generationally to spreading the gospel. So you're right, there's a lot there. And Dad Franklin's just a little younger than Dad, but he's a lot like that too. He's just a straight shooter, The
other thing I noticed is that just looking across the entire spectrum, and their clothes they were wearing reached to the floor, and they were saying godly things. I said, these you don't get a good look at the Kingdom women until what I saw the other night. I was impressed with it.
But you mentioned this down the last podcast, and we saw that there's when everything you're about is anger and protest and how bad things are. Even from a physical sense, you twist into something that's not very appealing.
That is correct.
You know what I'm saying? And that's across the political.
I did not see that the other night.
No.
This I don't know what you want to call it, dirty scene. It just wasn't there.
No, there's a piece that goes along, with the process of really having communities, which was kind of.
It just says, and Christians have, they get the reputation like they're not having any fun. I mean, that was one of the most fun things.
We had a blast.
That was a blast.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, I mean, I think you can only get so far if it's just a revolt, right? I mean, and it's a protest. I mean, I think that's what's missing in the kingdom right now. Well, I say what's missing. Now we saw that night. We also want to show the beauty of God, and the beauty should triumph over whatever it is that we feel that's destroying our culture. And you got to show something better. And when God's people get together, it was encouraging. It was very encouraging. It was very simple and pure. Just being with God's people that were happy and praising Him and laughing and worshiping and crying together. It was a great evening.
So, what I was going to do.
Before you leave it, let me say one more thing. Because we didn't get a chance to do this on stage. But I do want to thank our crew that's here. Josh is here today because Maddie's on her honeymoon. We talk about Maddie a lot, and she's new, and so we get to kind of poke fun at her. But she just got married, and so she'll be back next week. But Cade and No Name, as Dad calls him, Connor and Cole, and all of our crew that really does a great job because they have to edit everything we talk about and get this ready to go. And Dad said this before, we've never had a crossword with people that have worked with us either way.
True.
And that tells you about how great they are. So I just want to thank our crew because we haven't done that yet, but we win Podcast of the Year. It's not just because of us here doing this. Somebody has to get this presentable and get it out there.
I should have thanked them, but like I said, I was a deer in the headlight. And look, I should have
It's okay. We just, we had a lot.
I should have thanked Blaze too, because they're
provide the platform.
They do.
Yep.
And but I was wearing one of their nice hats. And
you are? I thought you were represented well because you got to wear it all night for everything. So I
I
wanted
did.
to say that before we left the subject of Podcast of the Year. So.
Well, it does take take a lot to pull it off. So, but I wanted to say I had this idea because we're in League 5, and you got to remember we came from commercial fishing backgrounds. This is what Phil chose to do for a living post Jesus.
Yep.
Despite 2 master's degrees.
Post Jesus, pre-duck call world.
Pre-duck call, we were fishermen. And so every time, and look, I'm just gonna be honest. The single most thing that got my attention towards walking toward Jesus was y'all's conversion, you and Mom. I mean, that was a big. I saw God's transformational power lived out.
I wish that we would make a movie about that. It would be powerful.
I think you
We should do
could. I
that.
mean, I would probably, call it something like.
The Blind?
Oh, The Blind.
Yeah,
Okay,
there you
go. And it could, and then if I only knew what that meant, but I'm working on Zach to tell us somewhere in the movie or in the credits to say this is why it's called that. So
Well, let me just Well, let me
Oh, yeah,
let me
go
say
ahead.
this.
Yeah.
I did ask Unashamed Nation. I said, "What do y'all think?" And they overwhelmingly responded with, "We keep it the blind." So the people have spoken, and since that whole concept was kind of born out of this community here, we're just going to run with it.
Yeah.
No, I like the name, Zach. That was not my argument. My argument was explain that somewhere on your packaging. That's all I said. Because some people, they may not know who Phil is, or
Right.
they may not know what a duck blind is.
Yeah.
They may not understand the concept of I once was blind, but I now can
Now
see.
I can see. Yeah.
So I just thought if you had a subtle explanation for it on the back of the whatever, or you know how they have these little what do you call them? An explanation for what the movie is. They're like the
A
tagline.
little disclaimer, whatever.
No, it's not.
That's a good idea. That's actually a good idea. I'm going to make a note
Well,
of that.
I've been telling you this
Nice
for a
making
month, and you've been taking that to mean I didn't like the name. I was like, no, I like the name. I just want an explanation somewhere for people. I like to be clear. Boy, I tell you, we can't go 5 minutes without an argument on this podcast. So now we're arguing about an argument that we never
It
had.
really wasn't an argument.
So what I was going to say, in the spirit of my Sirius radio and looking at things as a sign, I mean, I can't help it.
By the way, you're the one suffering. Not that I wouldn't love a lot of Billy Graham sermons, but just step over your pride and reorder your Sirius. I couldn't do with it. I'm in the car too much for that.
Al, I'm sending a message here. You know what I mean? I just did this. I can't help
Yeah, but it was a glitch in the system.
Somebody has pushed a wrong button. And I don't feel like it's my responsibility to call and say, hey, somebody pushed a wrong button because I signed up.
But I'm saying you're suffering because you're not getting to hear your music and all that.
I
So
just used it as a quiet time. So I'm
Okay.
not.
Well, that's
I'm
fine.
not. I
Whatever.
thought I don't need this anyway. I put my worship music on. But now that I've got Billy Graham 24/7, I'm
Which
like,
that was from the Lord. There's
this
no
was
doubt.
meant to be.
I agree with that.
It's awesome.
agree.
So I want to give you another sign. So here's when we were on vacation, we were supposed to be on vacation, but we're never on vacation. You can't take a vacation from studying God's word. So I was in Luke because we're in Luke.
Yep.
And we're in Luke 5. And so I think it's cool that this is a miracle about fishing.
Yep.
And what I was going to say, that even though Phil and Kay's transformation was probably the biggest thing that got my attention and led me to pursue the Lord. I used to read, when I first started reading the Bible, I'd read all the fishing stories because that's how I like to fish, you know. And so, and I could identify with that,
Yep.
especially some of the details that people who are not fishermen might miss. Like when you get to, there's another story that we're going to study in Luke 5, which is it John 20 or John 21?
21.
John 21, and it's fascinating when the Bible does this.
Yep.
You have what you think is the same story told by two different people, but it's not.
Nope.
It's the same miracle done at two different times.
Correct.
And the responses by Peter, who was kind of the central figure, or I guess, Jesus was the central figure, but Peter was the most notable, I guess.
He
'cause
was
of
the
his
most
response.
targeted of the
Right, of his response.
So we just recently had our Robertson family vacation, and of course now Lisa and I have our own house down there, and so we don't stay in the big house with everybody else. And so I noticed one of the blessings of that for me, Jase, is that in my house I have my Helix mattress that I'm able to sleep on even on vacation.
Well, one of the blessings for us is that we have more room.
That is true. And that was a nice house that y'all stayed at. But I had the Helix, so that was probably the better of the two. Helix has been a sponsor of our podcast for a while. We all have them in our homes, which is why I get to enjoy mine even on vacation. There's a lot that we love about the mattress. They offer a 100-night trial and a 10 to 15-year warranty to try out your new Helix mattress. So, you're going to get a chance to see if it fits you, and I promise you that you're going to love it if you try one. So you go online, and you're going to take a little quiz that's going to match you with your model mattress. And so for me, it was more of the medium. Some people like a little firm, some people like it a little softer, and they ask you, do you sleep on your side or your back? I'm a back sleeper. So all these things hit me perfectly. I love my mattress. It came straight to my door for free. Like I said, they have a 10 to 15-year warranty depending on the model. So I want you to check out Helix Sleep. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/unashamed. This is their best offer yet. It won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. helixsleep.com/unashamed.
So I think we all agree at this point in our Bible study that Jesus did these miracles to symbolize something. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
So when you start pursuing this and you see these 2 stories, it's really fascinating how Peter grew from the first time this happens, which we're fixed to read it, to the second time in John 21.
Correct.
It's fascinating. So we'll pursue that. But what I thought we would do, and what I was going to recommend when I was reading this, I thought, wouldn't it be cool on the podcast to just go over like our top 10 crazy catches? Because you got to remember, we fished for how many years?
About a decade.
No, longer. Probably 2
I think it was
decades.
longer,
Dad.
Phil.
Yeah,
I mean, even when the duck call cranked up, we were
we're still fishing, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably 20 years, yeah.
20 years. And look, we haven't stopped fishing since then. So when I go to the beach on vacation, we used to play golf. I used to like golf. Used to be my number one thing. But
Because we would play 27 to 36 holes a day. But we were young.
but old age has crept in.
we
and,
can't get through 8. I mean, my back got hurt the first round.
And to be honest, my commitment to our TV show, The Duck Family Treasure, which is fixing to come out, by the way, season 2, and this podcast, I had not picked up a club in
a year, probably.
almost a year.
Yeah, me either.
So don't say Jase is out there playing golf, messing around. No, I'm working here.
And by the way, we always are competitive. So we're playing Jase's sons and other young people in our family. And it showed.
It was complete domination.
We got dominated.
My sons just obliterated us. So there's that story. Let's not talk about it.
Let's
now.
don't talk. Okay.
So-
I just want to let people know we're humble in our old age because we paid a lot of money to a lot of the young people.
So my parting words to them every other day, because we didn't play golf, every day.
Couldn't take it.
Here's my $20 or whatever I lost, $10 or $12, and now I'm going fishing. So I thought about us telling the 10 greatest catches, because this catch on what happens in League 5 is spectacular, especially if you're a fisherman. But even if you're not a fisherman, this is a miracle. That if a person can do what he did, and that person being Jesus, this should get your attention. This should make you stop and think, well, wait a minute, if this is true, that this means my world is rocked. If there's a person who was on the planet who could control what fish do just from his mind, this is a person you need to look into.
Yeah.
And get to know, if possible. So you see where I'm going with it.
So do we get to tell one of our top stories?
No, well, I was going to, but you know what happened on the beach? One of my top 10 stories,
Oh, it just
perhaps
happened.
number
Oh, yeah.
1, happened the next day. So why don't you tell? I'll save that.
All right, so I got one I want to tell.
Okay.
It struck my mind when you said that a minute ago. So, and I don't know if you remember this, Dad. So this is, I think, this is pre-Christian days because we used to live in a trailer park in Farmville, right next to a lake.
No, that was definitely pre-Christian days.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if we lived there or went back there is why I'm saying that. But
That's true.
But I think we were living there then. So Dad wasn't a Christian yet because what we were doing was illegal. So it makes me think it was before. So
Statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations. So
Well, I remember that place is where, when Dad kicked us out of the house.
yeah, that's when it happened. So I was about 8 at the time. So I'm with you, Dad, and you're not supposed to fish nets in the lake. It was a rule, but you knew you could probably catch some catfish if we put a trammel net across that bridge that was right there next to our house.
Underneath the bridge.
So you and I went out. We had it was a little bit John boat. I mean, it couldn't have been over 12, 14 feet long. And so it's dark. We have no light because we're doing something you're not supposed to be doing. So I just remember being a kid, like being like super excited because we're like, we're doing this. So you put the net out, and then we go back. You felt something tug, so we went back around and started running it immediately. And you brought up an Opelousas catfish that looked like, at least in my mind's eye as an 8-year-old kid, it was as long as our boat. Do you remember that? That huge fish? And it had already ripped a hole in the net, and you were trying to get underneath him, figuring out how we're going to get this massive, we're talking about probably 100-pound plus fish into our boat. And that sucker took one turn and he was gone. Yep. And he left a hole in your net this big around. Yep. It was a massive Opelousas catfish under that. But it's just one of those memories that I'll never forget, looking at that fish as he came to the top, because my eyes got this big. He must have been 6 foot long.
He was as long as I was.
Yeah, 6 foot long. So that's one of my fishing stories.
I mean, there were many. We've shared most of them. The year that you were out of money, couldn't pay the bills, and you went out and put some trot lines up, and they started literally, there were so many catfish in the backwater, you were catching them on bare hooks.
Unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it before or since. Yeah. Every hook, before I baited them, had a catfish on it.
And you kind of thanked the Lord and said, you know what?
The trot line ran a quarter mile. I just went down a road bed. It's the road in the woods between Arkansas and Louisiana.
Yep.
Louisiana was on my right and Arkansas was on my left. Well, I went right down the middle, and I just would tie off on a limb like this, zigzagging. And when I left there, I had right at 1,000 pounds of catfish.
Good night.
Phil, I know why you were with two of my old ex-buddies I ran with. It was after I became a Christian, and I told them, I said, y'all fixing to see something that you've never done before or you never will do. I said, the fish, we're fixing to do it. And I put the line out, and they started hitting them hooks from the bait I had on them the day before.
Yeah.
So I would just bait them up. By the time I baited them up, I had the floor of the boat with fish, and then I just went back down there taking them off. It never stopped until the boat was about like that or sink it. It would have sunk the boat.
Yeah, about 3 inches. So Dad, you said something interesting. So you had started even then a process of when we would need money to pay the bills for Duck Commander, you would pray about it.
Yep.
And then would go do something like that, and the Almighty would answer the prayer.
And I saw some miraculous catches.
Yeah, that's what I think so too. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's just a coincidence, but it sure was.
Zach, you want to tell that story where y'all caught those 4 little brim in that creek?
Wow. I was respectfully listening to the story.
Well, sometimes the miracle is that you caught a fish. And look, we appreciate that. So that matters too, Zach.
When you catch 1,000 pounds, it's worth looking at. That's kind of what was going on in this Luke 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one year that my buddy had a place where we would duck hunt in a rice field, and we were going to go out there and go catch some frogs. This was when me and Jeff were in college, and we drove out to this rice field, and there were crawfish. Literally just the entire road and levee system was covered in crawfish, and we would drive the truck down. They would just scatter into the water. And so we came back. I don't know if you remember this, Phil. We came back to your house and said, Phil, we need to borrow your crawfish traps, which you had about 50 of them. And you said, as long as you bring me back a cooler full of crawfish, you guys can use them. And so we went out there and kind of the same thing. We started with roadkill, and we threw some roadkill in there, and then we put them in the trap, and the crawfish descended on those traps. But then we were catching so many that we went to the local crawfish store, Cormier's, where all the people in Monroe go to eat crawfish. And so we had about a 2-week run where we were selling crawfish to Cormier's until the farmer kicked us off the rice field.
Oh, you didn't mention the poaching part. I didn't know you were on somebody else's.
I thought that was all legal, but yeah, apparently he only had
that's
rights
not-
for duck hunting, not
that's-
crawfish.
What's yours is mine, and mine is yours doesn't apply to land.
Oh, it's pretty much belonged to him. That's funny. So one of our newer sponsors is a really interesting product. It was when we did the onboarding call with these guys. It was a doctor from Utah, and he was finding that there was a lot of his patients that were not able to get medicines they needed, whether it was because they were traveling or they lived remotely, or for a lot of different reasons. It was not easy for them to get prescriptions, especially if they have medicine they have to take, over a long period of time. And so he started a company called Jase Medical, not related to our Jase, even though Jase, it's good to have things named after
The
you.
name Jase means healer
It does.
for obvious reasons.
In Old English, that's right. So you're living up to that. But he told us he had a dog named Jase too. But really, really good people, great company. And so they have a product that's called Jase Daily, which allows you to be able to get a year's worth of your medicine. And you just can't do this any other way unless you do it through these guys. So I'm excited about it, being able to do it myself because we travel a lot. So I'm going to be getting my blood pressure medicine a year's worth, so I'll have it just to provide that security. It could be storms, it could be pandemics, reliance on China, supply chain issues. There's a lot of reasons why it's good to have your meds. You go online, you fill out a form, then you get your Jase Daily prescription delivered right to your door. So you get that peace of mind that you need. Go to jasemedical.com, JASE medical.com. Enter the code Unashamed at checkout for a discount on your order. So that's promo code Unashamed at jasemedical.com.
I have seen some fascinating things happen when it comes to crawfish, especially when it big rains. You remember our property one time turned into a river of crawfish.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It looked like some kind of effect on a movie.
Yeah,
right.
because that red underneath the water.
It was a river of crawfish.
Millions.
Which was fascinating.
Yeah.
So in all these
Good
things,
stories. Thank you for pulling that out after Jase just firmly threw you under the bus. That was a very interesting.
Well, I just figured if we would have submitted pictures, you'd have Zach and Jep with like 3 brim and a catfish.
and the catfish was a mudcat.
And, look, Jesus is better than a miracle. And I do think all these things, the conditions where you could, there is a difference in God working providentially and miraculously, which in this case, this was a miracle that they had fished all night. They hadn't caught a fish. And anybody knows about fishing, when he says move to the deeper water, well, fish the ones you catch are in shallower water. If you go out to the middle of the river, Phil attests this. How long did you fish the Ouachita River? Would you say, where would you catch most fish?
Near the bank or in the middle?
Out in the middle in the deep, or in this more... Now, I'm not saying...
Depending on what time of year it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
That's
is true.
That's
But
true.
I would say most of the time it's the shelf off the bank that
That's
goes
right.
to the deep.
That's right.
So what's crazy is Jesus is a carpenter by trade as a human. And I know that was not well received when he's like, hey, throw your nets on the other side.
No.
I can imagine you back then, because you have all these arguments where the fish are with all the local commercial fishermen. But, if a guy who builds houses comes down on the bank and says, hey, Phil, you need to put your net, because I imagine what you would say. And I hate to say it, but I'm being honest. I think you would have said, hey, you need to stick to building houses and let me worry.
Precisely.
About where my net sets go, right?
So I'll read the text, or you would tell my story on the beach.
I'll tell your beach story first.
Okay.
Then we'll read the two.
So here's what happened. We were what I like about going to the beach is trying to figure out how to catch fish from the beach that you can eat. Because I've always been a processed guy. I've already shared with you one of the reasons my wife loves me, other than, she made a promise to the Lord and me, but I mean, one of the
Other
things,
than she has to.
yeah, other than she has to, is she loves that I can go to the woods or on the water and provide for our family a meal and do the whole process. Catch, clean, cook,
Eat.
clean, sometimes clean up after it's over. So we had a plan, and look, this is like a 3-year plan. I've encouraged her strongly to book the house where we were at, because when I looked at my journals on where all our fishing, the best year we had, we were at the house where we stayed this year. I was like, I want this house. And she was like, why do you care? You've never cared. And I was like, because we hammered the pompano.
Yeah, which are
Caught
delicious.
limits of pompano on the beach there. So get the house, make it happen. And she pulled it off.
Yep.
So I said, I think there's something.
She's already booked it for next year.
Oh, I know. So that was the plan, is to go pompano fishing, which now you have to look up pompano. They're not a big fish.
No.
But they're really good to eat. And you can only catch 3 apiece. And so, we have this plan. We got all the equipment. We use 20-pound test line. But you catch other fish every time you go.
And one of the reasons, I'll just say, behind this house, there's kind of a flat out there.
It
and
is
a trough, which makes it good for that kind of fishing.
It is. So we strategically did that. We spared no expense. I bought a new rod and reel. We're all excited. It's all about the fishing. We're going to catch the fish. We're going to eat them on the bank. We're going to cook them for everybody. It's going to be wonderful. So day 1, we fished pretty well all day. And we caught 1 pompano. I mean, I'm talking about we fished daylight to dark. Now, we caught a few other fish. We caught a little baby shark and a couple of catfish, but just 1 pompano.
And by the way, just to set the scene for the audience, so everybody gets involved because they're using these sand fleas that you catch in the surf. And so the little kids are out catching the bait while the guys are doing all the fishing. And so, all the son-in-laws and everybody's involved in the process. It's not like it's just 2 people fishing. I mean, like, everybody seems to engage.
But you're fishing from the beach. So
From the beach.
I'm fishing
You just
from the bank.
And the women are all laying under the umbrellas right in front of, behind everything that's
They're
going on.
watching, and I'm under an umbrella. I'm trying not to get sunburn, which is almost impossible. But so anyway, and I did have a fish the first day that broke my line. I mean, something. I thought maybe it was a shark or whatever. I mean, it just pulled all my line off my reel because I had my drag set. Pop. I mean, it was just ferocious. So I was like, wow, not a pompano. So day 2, we go back out, a little more calm in day 2. And all of a sudden, we start catching pompano. Me and Jay, boom. So we're giggling, like we're back in junior high. Our plan is working. And then all of a sudden, and you got to remember, I got 20-pound test line. The rod goes off. Now, it's not like we're just we're a few hours into this. We're averaging about 1 pompano an hour.
An hour, yeah.
Which was pretty good.
That's
compared
good,
to
yeah.
1 in 12 hours the first day. And so all of a sudden, my rod it's more than just a pop. Because we had 4 rods out. I run over there. Well, this thing is just spinning, just like when I had my line broken. I said, this is not a pompano. And Jay's like, well, what is it? Well, I started running out of line because he's pulling the drag. So I start going down the beach because I'm out of line. Because he's not going out to the middle, he's just going kind
sideways.
of away and to the left. And so I'm kind of following him. And I kept telling Jay, I was like, well, there's no way I'm going to hold this fish. So we were trying to figure out what it is because we thought, is it a stingray? I was like, no, he's got too much run. And there's too much head movement. I can feel, and it's like, well, it can't be a shark because I have 20-pound test line. The
You've
shark
already
had
broke
teeth.
it, right?
Yeah, they cut the line. So we could not figure out what it is. Well, we get 5 minutes in, we get 10 minutes in. I'm not even trying to turn this fish. I'm just hanging on. If he runs, I go with him down the bank. Well, what happened was a crowd started gathering. Because, I am bowed up. And my lovely wife videoed the whole thing. And so we might can run some of that. I don't know. Now, look, I'm on the beach, so take it for what it is, But so 10 minutes in, Jay finally said, I think you're going to have to try to turn him. And I was like, well, why not? Because I can't.
It's probably going to break your line.
He's going to break my line. I'm getting tired, and I'm almost out of line. Well, so he makes another run, and I just bowed up on him. I stuck my thumb on my line so the drag wouldn't pull. And I thought, I'm either going to break my line or I'm going to turn him. Because this is a fight here. I'm like, I'm in charge. I'm boss until you break my line. Well, I turned him. So now I started reeling, and now I'm pulling. First 10 minutes hanging on. So we get 10 minutes into that, and now every muscle in my body, and I don't have many, and I'm over 50 years old, I am worn out after this. I mean, I'm dizzy.
Between the golf and now this, you're in bad
It's hot. So 10 minutes of that, now it's just become personal. You know, I'm like, water, you know.
Like Bill Phillips.
So, and then at 20 minutes in, the tide turned, and I thought there's a possibility that I'm going to land this, and I'm thinking it's a dolphin or a whale, something without teeth, because I thought, why is my line not breaking? So we get to the 30-minute mark.
All right, hold on. This is such a cliffhanger, and let's take a break.
And all of a sudden, it breaks the water. And to everyone's shock and surprise, and now the reason I'm telling this in the spirit of Luke 5, it is a shark. And at first glance, it's about 5 feet.
Here's the picture of it.
It's about 5 feet long. So you see that.
So we're going to show
4.5, 5 feet long.
Yep.
We were guessing at almost 100 pounds. And it was called, was it
black tip.
Black tip shark. So we couldn't figure out, and we landed the shark, and Jay grabbed the shark by the tail, and he was very careful because the shark was playing dead, but when he let go of it, it then did like an Anopheles cat does. It tried to bite with everything within a 6-foot parameter of that, which was very vicious to watch. And Jay was looking at me like, I could have lost an arm there, and I was like, yeah. So when we got to looking, well, he had a piece of wire in his mouth, and I'll tell you the story. What happened was not possible. It's impossible to land a shark that size
20-pound test
on 20-pound test line unless the shark had been on someone fishing for shark and on their get-up, which was a metal leader, which is what happened. What happened was someone who was fishing for shark got a hold of this shark, and it broke the line way up.
So he had the leader still stuck in his mouth.
Had his leader in his mouth. Well, then the shark swam by another Pompano fisherman, because we saw his rigging, and broke that line. Then he swam by another Pompano fisherman and broke that line. Well, I was the fourth person. He just swam by, and all this knot of line and hooks that he had broken, my hook just... He actually turned himself in. I didn't catch the shark. He caught me on the way by.
He wanted to get he was destined to be caught.
So I was hooked onto all these lines. So actually, when we removed the line, Jay took a pair of wire cutting pliers and
got
cut
the leader out.
Leader off without getting bit, which was very.
Well, y'all did this shark a favor. He was probably left there thinking he'd been to the dentist. Like, whoo!
He saved the shark.
Relief.
And released him. But so what happened was really a chance in 1 in millions for you to land a shark that big on the beach, which I noticed very few people went into the water after that.
Everybody's like, I don't know, because you didn't know that guy was out there.
Well, and I don't want to scare you off the beach, but after that happened, because we would walk out on the shallow bar and throw as far as it could, but you're walking, 50, 60 yards out in the water.
Yeah.
Well, one of my walks, I'm walking out there, and I look, and here comes a dark blob, and I kind of froze and looked, and it was about an 8-foot shark swimming right toward me. And so then you're in that moment of,
what do I do?
Well, what do I do? I started to run back, but I thought, I'll never make it. He's too close. I mean, if that triggers a response. So I'm there with a rod, and I just thought, well, if he gets within this rod, I'm going to try to pop him on the head, I guess. I mean, I don't know what else I can do. But he got probably 10 feet from me, and he just veered out. But so then I was like, "Hey, Austin, run this line out for me."
Dad, he learned that from you. Get the young bucks out there for that job.
So anyway, that happened. So it was a once in a few million scenario to catch that fish, but I was pretty proud of
And
it.
there was a huge crowd that had gathered around.
Everybody cheered, and I mean, it was, we kind of had a moment there. And then we caught our limit of Pompano, which we grilled them, and we all ate.
And I got to eat some. They were delicious.
Yeah.
Really good.
So that was a top 10 catch for me. It really was.
Yeah.
It's off the bucket list. And to do it with 20-pound test line in front of a crowd of people, it was quite exhilarating.
It was.
I landed the beast.
You did land the beast. All right. You can get back to
So
us.
with that, I want to read this story. So this is Luke 5. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. I don't know why we're calling that, because it says that is the Sea of Galilee.
Must be another name for it. I tried to look that up. I think it just had different names.
And I've been to this sea, and just think in your mind, it's like a bowl, and you can see for miles. You can actually see across it. But it's a lot bigger than it seems.
But you see why they would call it a sea, even though it's really a lake, right?
It is. It's like a bowl, and real pretty. And with the crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Well, Simon, you know how he is. He's like, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything." And I just want to say, too, the best time to, fish is early and late. I mean, none of this was checking all the boxes. But it says this famous phrase, which I love, "But because you say so, I will let down the nets." So he surrendered. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink, which I think is incredible because they went from jubilation, and even in a similar moment with us, I caught that shark, and it was really cool. But then I was actually horrified.
Because you got to deal with it.
Well, because somebody could lose a limb or their life we all underestimated the power of that shark.
Yeah.
Until I saw him flop and try to bite everything around here. But now you got the boat sinking. So you go from extreme jubilation to fear.
How are we going to get this?
And remember, these miracles of Jesus symbolize something, and that is going to be part of the revealing nature of this story on why this happened. And you'll notice that by Peter's response. So in verse 6, when they had done so...
No, verse 8's where you look.
Yeah, verse 8. So when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him.
Yeah.
So a lot to unpack here.
For a fisherman, those are great texts.
Yeah, we get it, right? I mean,
Oh.
when you spent that much time doing it.
You betcha.
One of the things initially that got me was, obviously, I don't know how well at this point Simon, what he knew about Jesus. The story of him healing his mother-in-law is before this text, but I'm not sure it happened chronologically that way. It could have been after. But one thing's for sure, out of whatever he heard Jesus talk about, and then maybe it was Jesus' reputation already in the Galilee region, that, as Jase pointed out,
They were a little suspect of him.
right. He went against his own fishing instinct to say, "Because you say so." So that said something about respect. That, okay, we're going to do this because you asked me. But you knew it had nothing to do with him
In his
thinking,
mind, he said, "We ain't catching.
we're not catching a fish. I mean, that's exactly what he thought.
We're going to strike out on this one."
And before we get into the deep meaning, I do want to mention the John 21:3. So now this is post-resurrection. So we're going way on the other. Peter has grown here in these
3 years have gone by.
Yeah. But you got to remember, at this moment, the last time Peter was with Jesus, he had denied him.
Yeah. Jesus had predicted he would deny him, and then he did it.
He did, and now, we have a few appearances that he's with, but you got to realize that was weighing on him heavy, even though he had seen his appearance and knew he was resurrected.
Correct.
So, verse 3 of John 21, I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told him. So it's like full circle. We're right back after the ministry of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. He's going back to fishing. And it says, we'll go with you. So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. So that's eerily similar.
Another goose egg.
Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. So Jesus is now post-resurrection in his shape-shifting mode.
That's right.
He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Well, this sounds familiar. Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some."
And how many times have you been fishing and somebody said, I think we caught something down at whatever? I mean, I've always, you've experienced something similar to this.
Oh, yeah.
before.
Yeah, I always think about that meme that people send me all the time when they're like, that Will Ferrell meme that says, "I don't believe you." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, John, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. Now, this is a totally different response. The first time he's like, "Go away from me, Lord. I'm a sinner." This, he's going toward, he's jumping out of the boat. The other disciples, verse 8, followed in the boat, which what a scene this is. Now he jumped out of the boat. He's swimming in front of the boat. They're going along behind him, and they're towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you've just caught."
So he had already had some fish.
Which is funny because Peter has jumped out of the boat. And he's like, and then when he gets there, Jesus is like, "Go get me some more fish." And he's like, "Oh." And he, so he goes back. He climbs back aboard. They drag the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. So now we have a count this time. But even with so many, and here's another difference, the net was not torn. You remember in the other story, the net was beginning to break.
That's right.
Jesus said, "Come, let's have breakfast." And none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord.
But he still didn't look like himself.
No.
Up to this point, which is really interesting.
And so then after this, there's this famous, I would assume if you haven't read this, it's a very powerful, sweet, yet just inspirational moment where Jesus reinstates Peter, and he asks him 3 times about if he loves him, because he had denied him 3 times. And at the end of the day, he gives him this charge to feed his sheep. So I wanted to read that because you have similar miracles, or the same miracle, done at 2 different times with 2 different responses by Peter, which shows something about his growth process. And we can discuss what this symbolizes.
Well, one of the things that jumps out at me, some of the comparisons, the first time Jesus is clearly, they don't know who Jesus is in terms of he hasn't done anything yet with them. And so they listen to him before the first miraculous catch. So they listen to him because they're intrigued by him, and they can see his physical appearance, but they're not sure who he is. It's really interesting when we get to the end, he doesn't look like he did at the beginning, but they instinctively know he is who he is because of the second miraculous catch. I just find that interesting that one time you're looking at him and you're not sure because you don't know much about him. But when you spend 3 years watching him do his thing, then it's like, oh, that's Jesus. He doesn't look like who he is, but I know him.
Spent a lot of time fishing, but they never had seen anything like that.
No. And that's why John just knew instinctively. He was like, oh, that's the Lord. When he tells you to throw your nets on the other side and you start catching fish, remember, that's the guy, which I find that fascinating, yeah.
Well, the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I don't know if y'all have ever thought about this, and look, I'm all about experiencing the presence of God. I think that's what eternity's going to be like. But if you'll notice, there's multiple times in the Bible when people realize that they're in the presence of God, it's not these flowery, because you see in cards and in worship, it's everything's flowery and but let's face it, when you realize you're in the presence of God, sometimes it's scary.
Yeah. It's
terrifying because you realize that you're not God and that you're sinful and you feel guilty and dirty and I think that's normal, and I actually think it's a positive thing here. And what Peter did is something that we all have to realize, that when God is real and he's present, we need to go down on our knees. And so it's what we do, recognizing our sinfulness and his lack of sin, his holiness, his purity. And I think that's part of it. And I think when you get to John 21, he had realized that Jesus is so good that he still loves us. And, he's running to him even though he had just denied him. And I think there's something powerful that Jesus was symbolizing there.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think the question is, thinking about what does a miracle, what kind of response does a miracle demand, particularly the kind of miracles we're talking about that Jesus performed. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast about not getting caught up in, focusing on the miracle above the miracle giver or the miracle worker. But I mean, to your point, Jase, just to reiterate that, when Simon Peter, when he saw the miracle, and they came and they filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, this is the first response. He fell down at Jesus' knees, saying this, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." When you think about when you see a miracle, and that's one of the things I would say is like a great litmus test for miracles today. Even does it demand that kind of response? In the presence of a holy God, you see this miracle performed, and your one response is just, "Depart from me, I am a sinful man." It's a recognition of your own inability in the presence of a holy God. So it wasn't just even in this moment that he saw that God was powerful. I mean, just in this miracle, he was aware in the presence of the miracle of his own sin, that where he said, "I can't even be in your presence. So depart from me, God." Just a recognition there. And then the second thing is the fear, that you mentioned, that should create some kind of fear in you. But I love the gospel of Christ so much because I love how Jesus responds, which is fear not. He says this. He says, and Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you will be catching men." So I love how Jesus takes the direction when he says, "Don't be afraid," but then he redirects Peter to the real purpose of the miracle, which was not to fill the boats. I mean, that's not the point of this. It's not to fill the boat up with fish. He's calling these disciples. He's calling them out to this incredible ministry to make fisher. They're going to make them fishers of men, and so he redirects them to that. So
yeah,
I just think you can't miss that.
That's really the truth, because that was the symbol, in that he's going to clean you up. I mean, subliminally, you're going to figure that out. He's going to forgive your sin, and he's going to make you fishers of men despite your flaws.
Yeah, I like it. Well, we'll unpack this some more. We're out of time for Unashamed. We'll go over to overtime and discuss this a little bit more, because there's a lot of really rich stuff that's in here. So if you want to follow us over, it's blazetv.com/unashamed to get our overtime segment. We'll see you over there.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.